I would say one of the things that is most interesting in working with somebody is in unpacking the stories they hold about the world. We are meaning making creatures. We all make stories. This is what we do as humans. Okay. We're narrative based. We like a story that says this is the way the world is and why. And we inherit stories from our family, from our religion, from our culture. And a lot of the time, these stories are unconscious. Okay. They play out in our thoughts, our words, and our actions, but we just take them as truth.
Mhm.
And these can be stories that say any number of things from this is the way the world is, you just need to accept it, or this is the only way to make money, or people like me can't have that, people like you can't do that, who do you think you are? All of these different stories. These are all just mental models that we hold about the world. And in starting to unpack the stories that we have, we gain a sense or we start to connect with our authenticity. We start to connect with what is truly ours. We start to connect with who we are in our bodies, in our minds, in our souls. And that is such a deeper foundation to work from. And so part of how we unravel these stories is by looking for the word should. That's
Mhm.
one of the easiest examples that I always say if somebody's looking to do this for themselves. Like shoulds are through lines to cultural stories. I should do this. I
Mm.
shouldn't do this. God, I should have worked longer yesterday. I'm not working hard enough. I've never done enough. I just need to work. I just need to focus a little bit more. Like wherever those kind of must, have to, just, should, like that are really rigid, they give us insight into the story that we believe. And that story a lot of the time isn't true. And so that space to challenge it gives us perspective and it gives us a whole new place to be.
Emerge Coaches Interview is a series focused on showcasing the expertise, process, and methodology of exceptional coaches or vetted individuals who are experts in various aspects of life. Our mission is to empower all of you who may be struggling in life by demonstrating that help is readily available. We want to serve as a bridge, connecting those in need with skilled coaches who can offer effective strategies and proven techniques for personal growth and transformation. By showcasing the success stories and insight of these exceptional coaches, we aim to convey the message that regardless of the challenges you may face, there are always ways to overcome and emerge stronger. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Emerge Coaches Interview. Our guest speaker for today is Laura Hartley, an inspiring individual who wears multiple hats as an activist, writer, and a coach. She is the founder of Public Love Enterprise, where she dedicates her time to support change leaders in overcoming obstacles to finding their clarity in their journey. She offers coaching and courses in healing burnout cycles and culture, inner leadership, and finding purpose in climate change. Please join me in giving a heart welcome to Laura Hartley. Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. Now, I've read a little bit about you, and I just want to jump in the question of from being an activist and trying to change the world, how did you like transition to doing the inner work and doing coaching?
Oh gosh, good question. So I actually think I came to the inner work first.
Mhm.
I'd always been passionate about inner work and I'd always been really amazed by the power of good questions, right? And this is really what coaching is about, good questions and what they can offer us in terms of perspective. And I'd had so many different experiences with inner work. I'd had suffered from depression and anxiety when I was younger. And so much of finding my way through that experience was to dive into a number of different modalities. I worked with meditation, therapy, coaching, plant medicine, you name it, I've explored it. And so I was fascinated by our inner worlds and what we could do to really cultivate them. But I also found working in the personal development industry and in the coaching industry sometimes that we weren't necessarily addressing some of the big crises that the world is facing. How could we talk about manifestation, but not talk about the climate crisis? How could we talk about enlightenment, but also not talk about how free we all are to fully express ourselves, this idea of
Mm.
liberation? And so it was that journey that led me further into activism and especially into climate activism and into asking these questions of what needs to happen in the world to change, what needs to happen outside of us in systems and policies and government and stories. And I really felt for a long time like I'd found my calling in climate activism. I was so passionate. I loved it. And I dived myself in head first, as we tend to do for anything that we love. And I was doing that full time and with a lot of my energy for a couple of years until I found myself in this place of exhaustion.
Mm.
And I found myself in this place of burnout. And I looked around me and I saw that everyone else around me was burnt out too. And I started to wonder what the role of inner work was in activism, right? What is the point of working on our burning planet if we're burning out ourselves? Asking this question of, are we not just using the same energy that we're trying to change in the world with which we're working? And so it was out of those experiences that I returned to inner work. And I came back to my roots and I started to look at how do we melt them together.
That's so beautiful. I like that because I can resonate with that, like starting on, of course, inner work first, like really building more self awareness. And when I start to at least be more self aware than I used to, I get excited of like, oh, how can I help other people? But then when I start going into the journey, realizing that it's a hard work, and then you feel alone. So I'm so excited. I'm very fascinated with the kind of work that you do, especially when it comes to helping leaders who are change makers who are also experiencing burnout. Can you tell me how do you do that or how do you help those people?
Yeah, and a lot of that depends on context, but I think I help people navigate the transitions that they're in and navigate the challenges that come with transitions. And often what has brought us there is, of course, not being happy where we are, exhaustion, stress, fatigue, feeling like we have nothing left to give. And so I work with connecting people back to their bodies, back to the kind of real lived experience that we have here in the present. I think as a culture, we live, as a world, we live so neck up, right? So many of us are living just in our thoughts, in our head. And there's this beautiful living body that we're often quite disconnected from. So I start there. And then I use tools of self inquiry, of reflection, journaling, and of helping people to ask the deeper questions of what it is that matters to them in life and where it is that they are called, where it is that they
Mm,
want to make a difference.
that's beautiful. I love those kind of work. And I just want to go back a little bit to your personal journey. How did you start? Was there a switch in your life that made you decide, okay, I want to do the inner work? Or what was the pivotal moment for you?
I think the real defining moment, I think, was really coming out of my own depression and anxiety when I was in my late teens. I'd followed all the traditional routes that were given to me. And some of them were very helpful, especially things like therapy and some of those spaces. But I still had this turmoil and conflict that I was carrying inside of myself, and I didn't know how to reckon with that. And I remember thinking very clearly that it was a choice point in my life as to whether I was going to actually look within and see what was there in its wholeness and with the bits that scared me. And that was my journey into inner work. That was my real moment of, no, okay, this is what you were called to do. And you have a choice here, but this is the invitation. And my work evolved since then, right? I think inner work is something that we do throughout our lives. I think it's something that's not just born out of struggle and depression. It's also something that's born out of growth. It's born out of joy. But that invitation at that time to look at what was truly real, what was truly meaningful, what I was really feeling was something that really changed my whole trajectory and changed my whole life.
That's so nice. And you said you experienced that when you were a teenager. Did you seek help in defining or answering those questions that starting to form in your head? Were you seeking guidance? Just curious.
Yeah, I think I did, but I can't say that I think there was like a particular modality or a particular person at that stage. There certainly have been others that have been really transformative. But I think I turned to books. I turned a lot. I turned to recordings that I could listen to. I started with journaling as well, and really just the process of asking these questions of myself and using my hands and my pen and paper to write it out, because there's such a difference than when you're typing. And it was just that beginning point, along with, I think, starting to dabble a little bit more in meditation, that started me on my journey.
That's nice. I asked that because I personally, like when I start again, everyone in the family, it was just me who's trying to ask this kind of question, who's starting to get curious and wanting to see what's out there and like, can I have a better life than this life that I have right now? What is it that I really want? And it's hard. I don't know anyone. So it's also the book that I went into listen to podcasts, like binge watch some inspirational YouTube video. And I just want to give a message to everyone that there's a lot of resources out there and it's a matter of curating. So, what's your way of actually choosing the book or like podcast mentors that you follow?
Oh gosh, good question. I like to find people who both resonate in the sense that they're looking to do good in the world. When coming from the perspective that I'm coming from now, I am very much approaching inner work and talking about inner work as an activist, and recognizing that we live in such a pivotal point in time. We're facing so many crises, so many conflicts in the world, and there is so much of the world that needs to be remade. And so I'm looking for people who are bringing that perspective and that lens, but also willing to ask interesting questions, willing to challenge the status quo, willing to think outside the box and maybe talk about something in a different way. So I don't know if I have an exact science for finding people, but it's like really just looking for what resonates and what vibes.
I like that. Now, you mentioned about asking good question, interesting question, and how it's very powerful. Like, how do you define if a question is actually good and it's helping you head to a good direction?
I love this question. Yeah, I say this because I think we live in a world with so many answers, right? We
Mm,
often have so many solutions and so many possibilities in front of us. What we don't often have is the right questions to help us use the best answer. Because if we had the right question, we wouldn't be facing so many problems that we have. So I look for questions that, and I think what defines a good question is something that helps us either see something in a different way, or something that helps us feel expansive, something that opens up our chest, right? Something that just goes, oh, yeah, no, I hadn't seen it in that way. Or you're right. Okay. Yeah. Over there. That makes sense. So it is something that is eye opening in some capacity. That to me is the hallmark of a good question.
yes, I totally agree with that because I notice I'm someone who asks question a lot to myself, but then I realized the question that I'm asking before was putting me down. Like, why am I not good enough? What's wrong with me? Those are like negative way of asking questions. So when I actually switch to thinking it more positively, as you said, when it expands your heart instead of shrinking you down, I realized that those were actually a kind of question that I want to ask. Like, how can I make my life better? Those kind of
Right.
things.
And so like questions like what's wrong with me, or like how can I be better, as such, they're often very limiting questions, because the framework that you have to answer them is this is what's wrong, or this is where you need to improve. And I think when we can shift that and be like, okay, what actually aligns with me? Where do I want to expand? Where am I improving? Where might I have blind spots? These are very different questions. And they just give us such a different space to work from.
It's true. And do you still think that the world these days are, because here in the Philippines, talking about mental health is still a taboo. If you talk about mental health, you're automatically labeled as crazy. What's your stand in that?
It was the same when I had my own mental health experiences, which is 20 years ago or so now. And it was so taboo then. There was a label of crazy, and I remember being so afraid of that label. And certainly where I am, that has changed to a large degree, but that stigma still exists. That's the reality of the world that we live in at the moment. But I don't think that stigma, I don't think conforming to that stigma is useful. Right? I
Mhm.
think that the more that we talk about what our experiences are, the more that we talk about the truth of what we're feeling, the more that we realize we're not alone. Because so many of us have these experiences. So many of us have felt this way at a certain time in our lives or are feeling it right now. And the more we talk about things, the more we can develop empathy, the more we can develop compassion, all skills and qualities that we need in this time. And that comes with a huge amount of fear. And that also comes with risk, depending where we are. And that risk needs to be very carefully considered. But if we have that ability and that privilege to do, I always try to invite us to lean into a little bit of vulnerability and to be open.
And I really appreciate people like you who talk about this and actually invite people in, that it's safe, it's okay to actually express yourself, to seek help. And as you said, vulnerability. I thought before being vulnerable is a sign of weakness. But now, as I'm practicing being more vulnerable, it takes a lot of courage and humility to actually admit and accept that, okay, I'm heading in the path of the depression and I need help. I need someone to talk to.
David White is one of my favorite poets, and he has this piece on vulnerability. And I wish I could remember this because I'm going to like butcher it. So I'm actually not going to try. But he talks about how in our youth, we think of vulnerability as some sort of weakness or an indisposition. And that it's only how we mature as humans and as people that we learn to inhabit our vulnerability, that we begin to see it as unavoidable. And that the more that we can actually embrace it, the more that we get to engage with life, the more real we become. And I find that such a beautiful perspective because that's not the common one that we have. As a general rule, as you say, we see it as a weakness.
Yeah,
And I really think it's a strength.
totally agree. And I just remember when I started practicing being more vulnerable, my default is expressing it in an angry way. Like I couldn't, yeah, like how can you help? Or what would be some of the tips that you can give for someone who wants to be more vulnerable, but don't necessarily have to be angry to express themselves?
I think it starts with actually finding a safe container where you can practice vulnerability. And that might be with a coach, or that might be with a close friend. It might be with a family member. It might be with somebody that you love and trust, but someone where you can start to lean into, okay, what am I really feeling right now? Because I think sometimes anger is still that protection for vulnerability, right? It's still that, like, sometimes it's vulnerable to be angry, but sometimes it's also hiding it. And so if we have that safe container and we see it as a practice, that's something we're going to lean into and we're going to communicate and we're going to stop and we're going to pause and we're going to ask, what am I feeling right now? I think that's where we begin. Otherwise, we can throw ourselves in the opposite end of I'm gonna just speak from the wound. I'm gonna throw everything out there. And we're really looking for this balance of what feels safe and but also what feels a little bit open or a little bit scary.
I like what you said that when you're angry, sometimes it's just to protect being vulnerable. And that resonate, that hits me because, yeah, I realized that's true. Like, I thought I'm being vulnerable because I'm speaking my truth, but I'm not comfortable saying it in a softer way. I'm using force to be able to get it out there. So,
Yeah. A lot of the time, anger is this, it's a really powerful emotion and it's one that we're often quite scared of because it can be so powerful. But there's so much wisdom contained within it. And a lot of the time, when we have anger, one of the roles that it can play is protecting us from other emotions, from softer emotions like grief, like love, like fear, like sadness, and like vulnerability. And so it's that it has this role of a protector. Actually, one of the things that I love is that when we start to recognize the role that certain emotions can play, we can actually start to actually have a deeper understanding of what's happening within us. We can start to have, oh, okay, I'm angry. Okay, why am I angry?
mm,
Oh, okay, I'm angry because I'm sad. Oh, I don't feel safe to be sad. I'd rather be angry. Angry feels like I can do something about it. Angry feels powerful. Angry feels somebody can like actually know what I'm feeling and sad feels, oh, scared and painful, but it calls us into reality, right? It calls us into what we're actually going through. And I think that's a powerful thing.
That's right. It's nice when you just pause and actually recognize, okay, I'm feeling fear, but what's really the underlying emotion there? And how do you cope with it when you realize, oh, this is actually the real emotion. I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling fear. Because as you said, people don't want to admit that because they feel that it's not safe. Like how do you make it safe to feel those emotions?
I think one of the first steps that is really can be really beneficial is meditation. And I think that there's so many different forms of meditation. There's and so many different modalities that we can work with. It doesn't have to be big 1 hour sit down practice. It can be just starting with 1 minute, starting with 5 minutes, and noticing what am I actually feeling? What does it feel like in my body? Like in my chest, in my belly, in like my shoulders, what's actually happening? And then sometimes we'll feel it and we'll be like, oh no, there's too much. Okay, that's not the right time. But it gives us that space to learn how to be with it. And I think it's so powerful for that.
Right. I really see as meditation to be a very good tool to regulate yourself. Even just breathing, just pausing and taking a deep breath, it allows me to, I don't know, bring oxygen to my brain and help me relax and noticing how I'm holding my breath so much. Or I'm having so much tightness in my shoulder. And okay, now I can just release and relax those tightness. So
Yeah.
good.
Just taking that breath. And this is such a physiological thing. Like it's having a real effect in our nervous systems. It's not just up here in our minds. Like it's really resetting the body, resetting the breath, and just starting to weave in those mindful moments throughout the day. They're just such a powerful little thing that we can do.
Are you seeing some change now in the world? Because before, meditation is not a thing. It's just starting to be trending these days. How do you think we can promote more this mindful practice? Or it's, are you seeing it more relevant or obvious now?
It is growing. Absolutely. I think that it is a practice that has been increasing in like all over the world and people see benefits from it. I think there's two angles for this. I think one is sometimes mindfulness is hijacked as a tool of productivity that says if you practice mindfulness, you can get even more done, even more quickly. And that's wonderful, but that's not what it's for. And I think that when we use it with that energy, it's often not, we're not reaping the benefits that I think it can really bring. And I think it's still a practice. And I think so often, and I will say this, somebody that's dropped off my practice rotor a lot, so many times throughout my life, but it is something that we continually return to, right? It's something that we do day by day. It's something that we do one and done, and then we've got it. And so that's a kind of challenge that even as more and more people do it, how do we create that container for us to stay with it over a period of time so that we really start to see the benefits that it can bring us?
It's nice. It just reminds me of the conversation I had with my stretch and accountability group. And one of them shared like his stretch was to add mindfulness, like meditating every day. But he came back to our session and he felt disheartened because he wasn't able to really do that. And now
Yeah.
instead of using the meditation to actually help you calm and relax, it was giving like the opposite benefit.
Exactly, because it's just another thing that we need to do. It's another thing on my to-do list. And especially when I work with people around burnout, this is one of the nuances and the challenges that we face because a lot of this wellness and the personal development, the inner work solutions that are given are designed to be add-ons, things you just do on top of everything that you're already doing. And that's exhausting. And so I think it's really about finding the practice that resonates with us at this point in time, recognizing that different practices will resonate at different points of our lives, and then viewing it less as something that we're adding on, but more as something that we're starting to sit within, that we're
Mhm.
starting to have as a foundation. And this might mean other things that we're doing actually fall by the side, but that we're prioritizing this as not something we're doing, but a way of being.
Yeah. a way of being. I like that. You said you didn't really start with meditation. Like, how did you get introduced to meditation, and how was that first journey like with you? Because a lot of people are saying like, "Oh, I can't meditate. Like, my mind is just too chaotic. Like, it's not for me."
Like my first introduction was when I was like 7 years old from a mother. Okay.
Oh,
So I've been introduced for a very, very long time. But I used for years, I had this racing mind, and I still do sometimes, right? What's colloquially called the monkey mind. And of course, when you first sit down and you try to think like I'm just supposed to like follow my breath and I'm supposed to be really calm and it's supposed to just happen and then it doesn't, it, you're like, I can't do this. No. And this is what I mean by meditation is a practice, okay? Because it is the act of meditation is the act of sitting there. And every time your mind wanders, bringing it back. It's not the stillness. It's lovely when that happens. It's not the beautiful blissed out moment. It's not the Zen master. It is the act of returning. And so whether you are returning every 5 seconds or whether you're returning every 2 minutes, it's still that act of returning. And so it's uncomfortable at first to do this. But I think with time and as we move through, the uncomfortability becomes more familiar and it's more organic to return in that way.
yeah, I love that. And it just reminds me of my first meditation. No, starting in the meditation, at first, I was like resisting all the thoughts, trying to get rid of the thoughts. Like, oh, I'm not supposed to think. I'm supposed to be still and have no thoughts whatsoever. But when I realized that I'm doing that, let go of resisting and actually just observe. And it's even more relaxing to just notice the thoughts coming in and out. Have you
Yeah.
not?
I have. And but that's the space to go to because we think we're supposed to be like just like completely in the moment with nothing happening in our heads. And I wish that was what happened, but it's not what happens. It is about just keep returning to the breath, keep returning to what's happening. And then through the watching of those thoughts, not the exclusion of them, not the like wiping them away, but simply the witnessing of them. That is the space that we get to reach. And if we haven't grown up doing this from a very young age. And I will say, as young as I was introduced, I did not grow up doing this. Okay. So it was very much a practice I had to learn. It is something that takes some time. It's a skill.
Totally. I want to talk about the work that you're doing and who are the people that you're working with. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So I call myself a life and leadership coach, and I work with change makers and climate leaders. So my work is really about helping change makers to navigate the transitions of life, whether that be personal, professional, or societal. So much of my work is really in this space of melding self work and world work. And I think a lot of the time when inner work has been approached in the context of changemaker, in the context of activism, or even in the kind of concept of entrepreneurship, right? It's been as this idea of, oh, it's something that you need to do for resilience. It's here's how you like going to keep your well being up. And it's this nice add on thing that you do. And it's also something that very much fits within the model of the world as it is, that story.
Hmm.
I think I view it a little differently. I see inner work as deeply intertwined with outer change. I think if we want to make an impact in this world, if we want to really, and that's an impact, whether that's, in climate, like I'm really passionate about, or any other sphere, or even with our own business, it's recognizing that our inner worlds shape everything that we're experiencing on the outside.
Hmm.
They shape how we're responding to the world. They shape our perceptions of the world. They shape the energy with which we're engaging in the world. And so everything that we're doing has to be considering what is actually happening within me. And so that's the work that I do in really helping people to go within, to start to really plant these seeds of thriving and relate to the world and to themselves in a slightly different way.
That's very sound interesting because it took me a while to actually go within. I always just look at, okay, what's the work that I need to do, or, oh, I'm unhealthy, I need to do work out without really trying to understand what is it that I'm feeling. Because if you just go ahead and, okay, I just have to work out, and then you're not seeing any result, you're still frustrated, or even though you're losing weight, you're still not feeling the satisfaction.
Yeah, or your business is thriving and you're doing great, but then you're burnt out and you're
Yeah,
exhausted and you have no time with your family and you're just constantly unfulfilled, wondering maybe I'll be happy when I reach the next goal or the next place and achieve the next thing. And instead it's no, actually, okay, maybe I need to stop and pause and look within and see what else is happening here, see where my values lie, see what's most important. And how can I engage both spheres together?
true. I'm curious, what is your process like when you're helping someone go into this inner work journey? How do you help them?
So it really depends on who I'm working with and the context with which I'm working with them.
Mhm.
I would say one of the things that is most interesting in working with somebody is in unpacking the stories they hold about the world. We are meaning making creatures. We all make story. This is what we do as humans. Okay. We're narrative based. We like a story that says this is the way the world is and why. And we inherit stories from our family, from our religion, from our culture. And a lot of the time, these stories are unconscious. Okay. They play out in our thoughts, our words, and our actions, but we just take them as truth.
Mhm.
And these can be stories that say any number of things from this is the way the world is, you just need to accept it, or this is the only way to make money, or people like me can't have that, people like you can't do that, who do you think you are? All of these different stories. These are all just mental models that we hold about the world. And in starting to unpack the stories that we have, we gain a sense or we start to connect with our authenticity. We start to connect with what is truly ours. We start to connect with who we are in our bodies, in our minds, in our souls. And that is such a deeper foundation to work from. And so part of how we unravel these stories is by looking for the word should. That's
Mhm.
one of the easiest examples that I always say if somebody's looking to do this for themselves. Like shoulds are through lines to cultural stories. I should do this. I
Mm.
shouldn't do this. Ah, God, I should have worked longer yesterday. I'm not working hard enough. I've never done enough. I just need to work. I just need to focus a little bit more. Like wherever those kind of must, have to, just, should, like that are really rigid, they give us insight into the story that we believe. And that story a lot of the time isn't true. And so that space to challenge it gives us perspective and it gives us a whole new place to be.
Wow, that's powerful. Thank you, Laura, for saying that. That's a should statement. That could be a good, oh, I'm having a should statement. Who is this voice telling me?
Yeah, exactly. Where does this come from? Where did I
Mhm.
learn this? Does this actually resonate with me? How does this feel in my body? Does it feel like really closed and tied to my shoulders are hunched up to my neck? Or does it feel expansive and open and freeing and good and light? What is actually happening? We can also ask questions like, who benefits when I act from this should? Okay. Who benefits? Is it, and sometimes that might be people that we're not necessarily intending. Who suffers when I act from this should? We can
Yeah,
start to use these questions to interrogate it and actually see whether it's true or not. Because some stories are great, but some of them are really not serving us.
that's true. It's really powerful. Now, I'm someone who likes to hold space for my friends, the people that I care about. But I notice that there are times that I absorb their energy, that I get to be feeling tired. And then when I come home, I bring that energy with my partner and I see us together in the same situation that my friend is actually sharing. Like, you as a coach, how do you make sure that you don't get affected when you're helping other people with their problems and baggages? How do you
Yeah. And so
protect yourself?
I think as a coach, there is that element of boundaries that are in place, that recognizing that obviously I'm supporting somebody on their journey, but I can't live their journey. And so there's always that kind of the boundaries of the container that we're in that help provide that. But also from my own personal practice as well, I'm very conscious of after a client session is done, of letting my body just move and shake and walk about, having a glass of water, doing these things that let me step into a different state. Even if that's just sometimes to step outside for a moment, for a minute or two of fresh air. It's something that clears the space that I was in and then allows me to work with the next person or with the rest of my work for the day without that same energy.
That's a good idea. Just letting your body move and releasing the tension and energy.
But
Are
this is
there,
the thing when we're using the word energy, right? It's
yeah,
physical. It's not just mental. Like it really is so much of this work is about listening to our body and letting it move, letting it be free. Because the more we can do that, the more in touch with it we are. I think, yeah, we move through these things more organically.
they're true. I read something in when I was looking at your LinkedIn, there was this word scarcity, and it's a word that I often feel. And when I feel scarcity, I'm feeling also impatient with the work that I'm doing. And even though I love the work that I'm doing, I'm so passionate about it. When I'm in that scarcity mood, I get impatient. What can you say about that?
I think scarcity is such a common experience in our world. I think it's baked into a lot of our world for us to experience it too. One of my most common manifestations is really of time scarcity and the feeling that there's just never enough time. And so often, like we say things like, I wish I had an extra day or I can squeeze it in. It's fine. And so we view time as this very linear, very extractable thing that we're racing against and not something that there's an abundance of, not something that is, cyclical, not something that we're in relationship with.
Hmm.
And so I think when we're unlearning scarcity, I think the first thing is identifying where does that scarcity show up in our lives. So for me, it's time. For other people, it'll be many different spaces. But where is it living? Where's it manifesting? I think second, we're looking at this feeling of, okay, what would it actually feel like to be satiated, right? To feel enoughness, to feel satisfied, to feel abundant. What would that actually feel like? How can I start to notice what that feels like in my body just from imagining it? We don't have to go into the reality yet. And then what are the triggers for that scarcity that come up? And so then it's that practice of, again, returning to abundance, returning to there is enough time, returning to trusting in enoughness, even when it doesn't always instinctually feel like that exists. I think it's always worth remembering when we're talking about scarcity. There are multi-billion-dollar industries in this world that profit off of scarcity, that sell off of scarcity. We are continually told that things are scarce every single day. Buy now or miss out. There's 2 rooms left at this price and somebody else is looking. And when we are exposed to that scarcity and that urgency every day, that's going to manifest in us. That's going to be internalized into us. And so our work is in recognizing that a lot of the time that scarcity isn't real. My story of there's not enough time isn't always real. It's just a default story I go to because I feel stressed and important and busy. And it's okay, there's the story, there's the scarcity. Breathe. What is actually in alignment with abundance here? What does enoughness feel like? Move from that space.
I love the word unlearning scarcity and being in a space of enoughness and abundance. That's a much better feeling to be at instead of like, how does it impact your life? Like being in that space,
Of
like,
scarcity?
no, and learning the scarcity and feeling the abundance. Because you said you don't necessarily have to take action right away or go out there. Like, what's the positive impact of that?
I think it's freeing. And it's also, it calms us. It calms our nervous system. Because the moment we're like thinking all those thoughts from scarcity, there's not enough time, there's not enough resources, there's not enough people to do the work, we're getting hyped up. We're feeling anxious. Our like fight or flight system is starting to activate because there's threat, there's danger.
Mm,
And so I think when we start to bring in the feeling of abundance, even before we can see it, start to bring in, okay, calm myself here. What's actually happening? We create that foundation to work from. We get more possibilities. We're more creative. We're not creative from scarcity. We're panicked and we're rushed. And
yeah.
sometimes we're driven, but we're not creative. And so there's so many different benefits, I think, that come from inviting this practice of abundance.
It's a really good thought there. Because before I'm like seeing, okay, I'm feeling scarcity. I need to do something about it. And yes, I get things done, but it's in a place of that threat, afraid. And there's no creativity that flows there. I notice when I'm in my creative space, I can get things done so easily. But then when I'm in that tightness, scarcity mode, even though I get things done, I'm still not very happy about it. I still feel tense. So,
Think about flow states. Think
yeah,
about that beautiful flow state that so many of us we desire because we get so much done from that space, and it's such a powerful space and creative space to be in. You do not enter flow states through scarcity. You do not enter it through thinking there's not enough time. I need to work faster, harder, more now, quickly. Urgency doesn't always mean speed. And so we have to, I think creating this kind of practice in ourselves help us like really work in a more regenerative way, more innovative way. There's just so many benefits.
so true. Laura, I'm really loving this conversation that we're having. And thank you so much for sharing such wisdom and knowledge that you have. I'm excited for people to hear this interview that we're doing right now. So we're running out of time. So I'm just going to ask a little bit, some wrap up question here. Like, you're a coach yourself, but if you will hire a coach for you, what area of growth would you seek help with?
Ooh, good question. I think right now it'd be business. It would be business. It would definitely be a business coach. But I also think I would be interested in feminist leadership as well, right? How are we using feminist values into the way in which we're living and working? So one of those two.
Nice. That's good. Yeah, I asked this question because I think people think that when you're a coach, you already figure things out and you're good. But also to show that it's so important to actually keep learning and also tapping into people that could guide you that you can learn from. And that's important.
It is. This is a lifelong journey. Like wherever we are and wherever we are, there is always more to be growing, to be learning, to be expanding. And so finding the people who can help us is so key.
Totally. Now, if you're speaking with someone who wants to take more ownership of their personal growth journey, what is one resource, like a book or a podcast that you can recommend so that they can emerge as a better version of themselves?
There is a book by Colin Beavan called How to Be Alive, A Guide to the Kind of Happiness That Changes the World. It is a brilliant book that melds happiness and living your most fulfilled and purposeful life with making a difference. It's a book that's certainly influenced me over the years. And I think anybody who wants to, to grow themselves and grow the world together, that's the one.
Sounds like a good book. I'm going to check it out.
It's so good.
Yeah, and if you can actually invite people, like how can they follow you or where can they find you?
My website is laurahartley.com. I'm active on Instagram. My handle is at laura.h.hartley. And I'm also on LinkedIn if that's your space.
Great. I'll also share your links in the description. So for everyone who's interested in connecting with Laura, just check it out. Laura, thank you so much again for being here and sharing this, having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it and learned so much.
No, thank you for having me. I've so loved this. So thank you.